So we decided to continue on our little trip with Civil War trail signs. And I am in North Carolina. Just got through with a stop in Charlotte, North Carolina, and decided to head up the I-85 all the way towards Virginia from Charlotte and try to see how many trail signs we can see along the way and see what kind of Civil War history is out here in North Carolina. I'm headed to one of those stops right now, making my way over. Well, today I'm in Salisbury, North Carolina, and I'm checking out a place where the CS military prison was, Confederate States military prison in Salisbury. And I just bumped into a gentleman over here that gave me a little bit of a brief of the history of this local area, and he's pretty knowledgeable about everything and definitely pointed me in the right direction, so that was kind of a treat to be able to talk to him about this. Out here on November 2nd of 1861, 16 acres of land was purchased by the Confederate States out here, and it was to be used as a prison, and it was used for quite some time, but then the prison flow stopped because the exchange happened and a lot of men from inside this prison pretty much left. And in 1864 it got really overcrowded because the United States military was no longer exchanging people like they were in the past. So we're going to take a look at this place. So I decided to flip this camera around and kind of give you a little bit of a tour of what I just received too. Now this house here, this piece of property, is one of the properties that were originally here on the map or the picture of the area. And I'll put that picture up and point to the location. And coming off over here, this is the bridge that's in that picture, or at least where it was. This is a modern day bridge. And another bit of information that I was given while I was out here was that this railroad cut was cut some time back, and if you look down there and you notice the stone, this was placed in here in 1840. And then based on the information that was given by the local, he tells me that off in the distance there, the height of that bridge out there is what the original bridge height would have been over here at this location. And the soldiers would have come in on that side and eventually made their way down the street that was here, across this area, and the entrance gate for the prison itself was over here. And the 16 acres of land start off in this direction here and works its way all the way down that way right there where that cemetery is. That entire 16 acres out there at one point in time was designed to hold about 2,500 soldiers, but eventually became overcrowded with 10,000 plus soldiers. Now, one of the most famous photographs of the American Civil War, a baseball photograph, was actually taken out here too. So it's pretty neat. Now, this place doesn't look like it today, but that street directly behind me, this bridge that I'm crossing over, this would have been a place of misery. This is the entrance to that Salisbury Confederate prison for Union soldiers. And just like any prison, regardless if it was Confederate or Union, it would have been a place of misery because the men were overcrowded, didn't have enough to eat, and they didn't have enough shelter. This entire area behind me here is that prison. And today there's really not much to see because there's houses built on top of it, starting with the first one in the 1880s and working its way to modern day houses today. We're gonna walk around Salisbury and see what they have to offer and check out the history out here. Well, out here on these road trips, you never know what you're going to bump into. And I definitely ran into a gold mine out here in Salisbury with the gentleman that lived in the old house out here, who knew probably more about this area than I could ever read up on. He spent his entire life out here. He was very knowledgeable about that prison camp that was over here too. And he also tells me that the Civil War trail sign that's out here is constantly being scratched up and vandalized by some folks that are out here in the local area, probably because they're ignorant on the topic of history. Definitely doesn't make much sense to me why you would scratch up a sign that has to do with a prison camp. Now, it's real neat getting to walk up into some history like this. This courthouse that was built in 1855. And it's made even better by the signs that the Civil War Trails put out here to tell you the story of a place like this courthouse. And the fact that it did survive Stoneman's raid and the destruction that happened out here in Salisbury during the American Civil War. It's pretty amazing, though, taking a look at this and knowing that it lasted for so long, and that this huge structure was the courthouse out here until 1914, when eventually another courthouse was built and it was used. Today, it's a very beautiful building that sits here in Salisbury and is a reminder of the antebellum period during the American Civil War here in Salisbury, North Carolina. based on the information that we have here on the sign, this courthouse that's right in front of us actually survived the Civil War and the destruction that happened throughout this town. It was a courthouse erected in 1855, and Salisbury native John W. Ellis, who was North Carolina's governor when the war broke out, was the first judge here. He was called the secessionist governor for refusing to send state troops in an answer to President Abraham Lincoln's call for volunteers to support the suppression of the rebellion. On May 20th, 1861, North Carolina became the last state to secede from the Union. Almost 4 years later, on April 12th, 1865, General George Stoneman, leading a cavalry raid through western North Carolina, rode into Salisbury, and his forces burned vast quantities of military stores, including 10,000 weapons and 1 million rounds of ammunition, 17,000 uniforms, and 250,000 blankets, and more than 200 tons of food and other supplies. This was one heck of a bonfire that happened out here at Salisbury. We're going to shove off from here at this big, beautiful building. We're going to make our way over to the third and final stop here in Salisbury for the third Civil War Trail sign that's out here, and see what's next. We'll make our way to it. Just hang tight. So as I'm pulling around the corner for the next stop, I come up on the corner and there's this just gigantic, big, beautiful structure, and the sign's sitting right out front. So we're going to move on over here towards this final sign here in Salisbury, North Carolina, and see what it has to say. Now the house is out here, and the sign talks about this place opening up as a sort of a women's academy, I guess. But it also talks about Dr. Joseph Hall, who lived in this house and owned a huge piece of property in the area and was an agricultural man. He also was a doctor in the Confederate prison out here for Union soldiers, and would serve to support the efforts of basically saving people's lives. And he did so the entire time. This property was owned by his descendants for a very long time. And then eventually, I think the sign said somewhere in the 1970s, the property was turned over to the local Historic Society, and the Historic Society turned it into a museum. So today you can actually walk around that property when it's open, and you can go inside and check it out. Some pretty neat history here in Salisbury. But now we're going to move on and push down the interstate to the next stop. So we moved on from Salisbury. We headed over to Lexington, which is off of 285. There's a couple signs out here to give a little bit of Civil War history. We're going to check this place out and see what they have to offer. So this little house right here was owned by Dr. William R. Holt, and he was a pretty versatile man, according to the sign out here, with his many ventures in North Carolina. When Holt learned that the federal forces were approaching Lexington in 1865, he left to secure his plantation Linwood, while his wife Louisa Holt remained here with the children. Union General Judson Kilpatrick of the 9th Pennsylvania Cavalry soon arrived in Lexington to patrol the county and establish order for the Reconstruction period out here. In order to save this home from destruction, Louisa decided that she was going to allow General Kilpatrick to make this his headquarters. She actually offered it up to him, which turned out to be a good thing. He immediately planted a flag right out here on the front of this property, an American flag, and marked this as his headquarters, and him and his staff stayed inside this house along with Holt's family. Now, all indications are that Holt's family were treated very well while this house was being occupied by Kilpatrick. And when Kilpatrick departed, he gave the family some gold and sugar, and he also gave daughter Amelia Holt a black pony that she named Kilpatrick. Now, even though there's no significant Civil War activity that happens out here other than the beginning of the occupation known as the Reconstruction period, this particular property here the mother was so concerned with the safety of her daughter that she ended up putting brackets on the doors, and they still exist today. On the actual doors of where the daughters essentially slept in the rooms in this house behind me here. And it's kind of a stark reminder of the crazy times that were going on at that time, and the concerns that citizens in the South had about this occupation. They had made war with the North, and the North had made war with the South, and they were not sure as to how they were going to be treated. And there were a lot of rumors swirling around about young women being assaulted by soldiers, and that was actually true in some southern towns, especially during the Sherman's raid that pushed all the way to Savannah, Georgia, and then back north. And it was also true about a raid that took place in Virginia, in Sussex County. Women were actually assaulted. So you can see why Miss Louisa would be concerned about her daughter's safety with a bunch of soldiers inside this house during occupation. But those soldiers here conducted themselves professionally, and Mr. Kilpatrick himself was a very professional officer and a good soldier. So I have no doubt that those men would not conduct themselves in any other way. So very interesting history here in Lexington. And now we're about to move on and push to another sign that's here in Lexington and check out the history over there and see what we can read and learn about Lexington, North Carolina, and then make our way up through 85 to the next town. So bear with me. Sometimes when you're out looking for Civil War trails, you end up running into a whole bunch of other types of history. And right here on this spot, there is a rock that talks about Daniel Boone actually settling not too far from here. And then near this spot in 1781, the American Army under General Nathaniel Greene passed on his way from Trading Ford to fight the British under Lord Cornwallis at Guilford Courthouse. Some pretty neat stuff here. And the spot that we were actually looking to go see is this courthouse over here where some folks are setting up to play music. So I don't know if I'll be able to get over there and stand in front of it and talk about the place there, but we'll see. Lots of music going on out here today at the old Court Square in Lexington. We're over here at the Civil War Trail sign. Lexington and the Civil War, occupation and fire. April 16th and 17th, Jefferson Davis was fleeing south. He was headed out of Richmond, and he ends up pausing here in Lexington. But that courthouse behind me there, the reason why it's talked about here on the sign is essentially because it became sort of a headquarters for the officers and men that were in this area. Kilpatrick was staying in a house near here, and the men were in that building right back there. And at one point in time, a fire starts inside that courthouse. Now, it was said that the soldiers themselves may have started that fire, but then also locals report that the soldiers helped to extinguish those flames as well. So I guess two truths can be had here. It is possible that the fire was maybe accidentally set by those soldiers and then put out by the same soldiers who set that fire, but we'll never know. But thanks to them putting those flames out, many of the records here in Lexington were saved because of that, and the courthouse still stands today. And even though this is a quiet small town here, countryside, and many of the stores are vacant, they no longer have people selling things, and it's still a beautiful place to visit, and it's a nice stop on the Civil War trails. Many town squares across the United States bear symbols of history, just like Lexington here does. It's worth getting out and seeing. And if you follow the Civil War trail signs, you're probably going to bump into more than just Civil War history. That's why I like doing this stuff and bringing it to people. Just stick with us. We're going to move on down the interstate now on I-85 and head to the next town to see what we can find here in North Carolina. This location might not look like much here in Thomasville, North Carolina, but in 1864, General James Longstreet and his corps passed through here on the railroad headed north from Georgia to rejoin Robert E. Lee. In March of 1865, General Joseph E. Johnston briefly established hospitals and tobacco warehouses and in the local Baptist and Methodist churches as his Army of Tennessee retreated north along the railroad. So this is some pretty significant history here, and the town itself actually grew up around these tracks. I mean, this has really been the lifeblood of this town for a very long time. And as you can tell by looking across the street here at the mural that's on the side of that building, the thing that's right in the center is the train. And to the left is the train depot. So this town was a textile town and a train town for a long time. Today it's a very small, sleepy town, but still today, a lot of trains run up and down these tracks. Now just think about the timing we're talking about when we talk about Longstreet coming through here on trains. 1864. He's coming back from Georgia. So what does that tell you? Well, there was a battle you might have heard of that took place down there, and Longstreet was a big reason why it was a victory. It's called Chickamauga. You can see the train tracks behind me here. And then Johnson retreating at the end of the war. These train tracks have seen some history, some very significant Civil War history, for sure. It's a pretty amazing stop here in just a small little town in North Carolina. You got to follow those Civil War trail signs. You never know what you're going to get. It's been a neat little stop. It's time to push on down the road. There's a couple more signs here in this town, and we want to see what remains here. Then after this town, I think we're going to have to push out of here and head straight back up to Virginia because we're pressing for time. We got an interview with Robert Lee Hodges. That's going to be pretty interesting. Now this stop here might not look like much to you here in Thomasville, and it's right down the street from where I was just located just a few minutes ago. But right there, on that street corner right behind me, was one of the biggest shoe manufacturers in the state, and it produced a big portion of shoes that were to be used by the Confederate Army. Also, some of those shoes ended up in the hands of the Northern Army as well. So all those foot-sore soldiers would get their actual brogans right here from this factory that would have been located roughly right about where that building is right there. And also, the 12 employees that were inside there, those employees were actually exempted from the Conscription Act here in North Carolina, which meant that they were not drafted into the Army because they were so important to the effort, the war effort of creating these shoes here in this factory, that the governor, Zebulon Vance, decided he could not spare them to put them in the Army. So manufacturing here in this part of North Carolina was the biggest contributor to the Civil War. There was no battles here or any real major conflict that happened out here, but what they contributed in manufacturing goods, including tobacco, was pretty significant to the Army of the Confederate States. all good things must come to an end, including this trip here in North Carolina. And we're on that third town here in North Carolina where we were exploring some Civil War trail stops, and we're going to end this trip here at the Thomasville Cemetery. There's a Civil War trail sign inside this cemetery right over here, and we're going to check it out and see the history that's on that sign, and also maybe talk about some people that are in here buried in this cemetery. So make our way over there now. Now, one main difference that I've already started to notice here in this cemetery versus a lot of the cemeteries in Virginia. The cemeteries in Virginia are filled with old stones. You go to just any old cemetery and you're going to find lots of war veterans buried there and things like that. I'm seeing a lot of modern-ish headstones out here. But there are a few interesting stones that are marked for Confederate States soldiers and things like that. So it's pretty neat to take a look at. We're going to see what we can find out here. Graves out in this part are starting to get a lot older, so naturally the Civil War trail sign is right over here. It looks like there's a flagpole here, but I'm not sure what that flagpole was for. But there is a placard down at the base of it, and we'll read that placard and see what it was for. Now, the place that I'm standing at right now is a cemetery plot that was put out here just after the American Civil War. That's the plot right there. Out here in Thomasville, there were refugees fleeing out here left and right from towns surrounding, trying to run away from war as it was kicking down the doors of the citizens in the small little villages throughout North Carolina. And in this area, the local people chipped in by creating hospitals essentially for soldiers that were traveling back and forth on trains and needing assistance for sickness and for wounds sustained during battle. Here in this plot, some 34 soldiers who died in Thomasville, including 26 Confederate soldiers and 4 unknown soldiers, were buried right here. Later on, a Georgian who helped take care of those soldiers and served in the hospital here raised enough funds to give headstones to the soldiers that were buried here in this plot. After the war, right around 1908, That's some pretty interesting information, and it just goes to show that even for those people, the civilians that were serving these people at the time and helping in any way that they could, no matter what soldier was hurt, the scars of war were still trying to be tended to by these people that experienced this after the American Civil War. These were just average, everyday folks that were dealing with a war that had ravaged their towns, their homes, and their firesides, and taken people away from their lives, and all these people just up and disappeared because this war killed them. It's amazing that this person came back all those years later, and it was so important to him that he had to put these stones up here. He had to raise the funds to dedicate some sort of monument to these men that died out here. It was his way of healing, and also his way of letting people know in the future who's out here. It's a fitting tribute to these soldiers that passed away. I'm sure that that these soldiers would have rather gone back home than to be buried here in this plot. But we're here today to tell that story and give you a little bit of this information like we just did, so that you can come out here maybe one day and visit these soldiers yourself and see this history here in Thomasville, North Carolina. It's real neat. Well, I'd love to stick around and travel the entire I-85 and so on and so forth and get to as many of these spots as I can. And I know there's several signs up 85 that I'm not going to be able to cover in this video here for you, but I hope you enjoyed this small tour of some of the stops that are in North Carolina. And hopefully we can get back out this way again and cover some more of it. I know North Carolina is not known for the American Civil War and the conflict. It's mostly known for Revolutionary War battles, but there is American Civil War history out here. North Carolina, after all, was a big contributor to the Confederate Army and to the Union Army with men and material. North Carolina contributed probably more men to that army as far as death is concerned than most of the units throughout the American Civil War for the Confederacy. They definitely stuck to the ground when it was their turn to fight. So hopefully you enjoyed again. Like I said, we got to get back home in time for that live stream up in Virginia. And until next time, this is History with Waffles. Also, make sure you subscribe and like, hit that alert bell on there. Keep you up to date with all the videos that are coming. And we will have Jeff Shara on our channel April 19th for a live stream interview where you can actually ask him the questions about anything, his books, what have you, live on our channel on April 19th. We'll see you out there in those trails.